Hello. Today we're going to talk about how to make decisions faster. Many of my clients come to me with a problem sometimes. They tell me that they are procrastinating on making personal as well as professional decisions. And one of the reasons this happens is because there's a lot of brain noise, right? We get a lot of external stimuli. We get a lot of feedback from our external world. And we take all this feedback, and part of the reason the brain noise comes up is because we're processing and trying to sift through this brain noise in order to make our decision. And while that's all right, and we need to do that in some situations, we need to take information, gather, that has its place, right? We need to gather enough information, and then we make a decision based on the information we have. But there are times in our life where we need to make decisions quickly. We need to make decisions that are in alignment with us, especially when it comes to our personal life. When it comes to our business life, we gather evidence, we gather information, and we make the decision. But even in our business life, there are areas where we need to make decisions quickly without delaying our decision making so that we realize the benefits of that quick decision making. Now, what are some of those situations? In our personal life, we may be pondering as to whether we want to go into a certain type of relationship or we want to leave a certain type of relationship. And so when we are in that space of trying to decipher what our decision should be, we kind of get into the mode of getting in our heads and trying to make that decision from our heads. And then in our professional life, when we are very active and trying to make decisions again, we might be trying to decide whether we should, implement a project one way or another way. And partly what's holding us back is that we don't have enough information to make that decision. So we're gathering information. And that's okay. But there are ways in which we can actually make these decisions faster and more in alignment with what we are wanting without having to gather every bit of information. And that way of making decisions is through our intuition. So our intuition, it's kind of like this funny thing because most of us think we are intuitively deciding something, but the reality is we're actually thinking our way into something. And when we're thinking our way into something, we actually almost always have doubts coming in. The thing about intuition is that it is actually not a thinking game, it's a knowing game. So thinking versus knowing. Now, when we are operating in instinct and impulse, I get this question a lot, so I'm just going to get this addressed in a longer post. Instinct is about avoiding something. So that means we're stepping away from something, we're going to avoid it, okay? Impulse is we are impulsively going to do something or move towards something. So, for example, you might be walking by a pastry shop. Suddenly you look at all the pastries in the window and go, I'm going to go and get myself a cake or a pastry. That is an impulsive choice. That impulsive choice has certain consequences. Good, bad, doesn't matter. It has certain consequences. The instinct to avoid is something is hesitating within us and we are wanting to avoid facing that. So we want to make a decision to avoid something. So for example, we see somebody that's coming across us with a certain look and something in us tells us that it's wrong. Something doesn't fit right. That is an instinct to avoid a certain type of person. Now, both instinct and impulse have their roots in our stress response. So they're a mechanism to warn us of potential dangers, okay, and to help us avoid dangers. Whereas intuition, on the other hand, is much different. It's actually a knowing that cannot necessarily be verified with information, but there's a certainty attached to that knowing. So you will not necessarily have information or evidence to corroborate what you know, but you will know it. That is intuition. And what I want to discuss in this post is to how to recognize your intuition and how to start relying more on your intuition rather than information, which comes in the way of instinct and impulse to seek or avoid. Okay, so impulse will be to seek, instinct will be to avoid. So why is this even important? So what I have noticed among a lot of us, when we are running in stress response, we are always seeking information to corroborate that we are going in the right direction. We don't allow our intuition to do its work and to guide us into a situation. And intuition actually knows it based on experience rather than information that is out there which hasn't been processed. Does this make sense? So your intuition is actually coming in at a higher level. Some say it's at the level of the soul. For those of you who don't believe in the concept of soul, spirit, doesn't matter. It's about having a certain knowing, okay? And the knowing comes from experience. Therefore, you do not have to think about it. You actually know how to do it without having to think about it. So an example of this may be evidenced in your job. You do certain things without even having to think about it. You know when it is time to do something and when you should go in a certain direction without having to think about it. That is an example of your intuition in operation. And so the advantage of running on your intuition is that even though you may not have information to corroborate, you actually have a knowing inside of you that already corroborates from inside of you. So the difference is that you don't have to seek external evidence in order to validate your direction or your decision. So why does this become super important in life? Because I think as a society, we've gotten so used to external input in our life that we stop operating on our internal input. And so operating on our internal input gives us an avenue and a channel to actually rely on our capacities to make decisions in our personal as well as in our professional lives. And not only does that give us the speed of making decisions, it also actually gives us more of a foolproof way of making decisions that are beneficial for us in the long run without having to wait in time to see if our decision is right or wrong. And typically also, when we make decisions that are based in our intuition, because it's our experience, we also have the wherewithal, the skills, and the tools to correct course very easily, to put ourselves back on path very easily when things go off a little bit. This is why it's really important to use intuition rather than instinct or impulse. So with that said, I want to explore the number one reason we're not able to tap into our intuition to make decisions. I kind of talked about this toward the beginning of this video. One of the key reasons we're not able to do that is because we are so caught up in our thinking and in our stress response mechanisms. Our stress response mechanisms are responding to every external stimulus that's happening outside of us, and we're not allowing or giving ourselves time for all the stresses to calm down. And when we don't give ourselves the time for our stresses to calm down, our intuition, the voice of our intuition actually goes down. So we now do not have access to that voice when we are making decisions. So that's the number one reason our intuition gets shut down. How does this manifest in our reality, in our everyday life? Let's say you're in a relationship. You're in a relationship and you have been in several relationships in which this guy you're in a relationship or this gal that you're in a relationship is doing has just kind of like made you think, is this the right person for me? So this is your experience telling you something is off. And you have that immediate thought, let's say spark of thought, not thought, but spark of thought that has landed, that is telling you that. And you go, yeah, but. And then you have this afterthought that comes in to kind of kibosh that initial first thought that you had. And you go, yeah, I'm just having the afterthought. Yeah, that can't be right. I'm just going to give this another chance. So what you have just done is you have taken your intuitive voice and you have suppressed it. Now, we all do this at some point or another in our life. I just want you to start recognizing that you are doing it. And the only way we can start to shift out of this pattern of negating our intuitive voice, completely going against the grain of our intuitive voice, is to actually take the step of saying, I actually do move away from my intuition. That first thought that comes in, I'll actually second guess myself and move away from it. And why do we do that? Why do we actually move away from that first thought? What I have found, it's a really funny thing. What I have found is that we as human beings are addicted to thinking that we must work really hard to get to a solution. I just want that to land for you. Okay? I just want you to feel into that. You want to work really hard to find a solution. Why do we want to work really hard to find a solution? We want to work really hard to find a solution because we want to feel validated that we found the solution through our hard work, especially some of us who have grown up with this feedback that we've gotten that you must always work very hard to get things in life. We actually rely on hard work to give us the answers rather than our intuition to give us the answers. So we put ourselves in situations, we put ourselves in connection with people who are going to reflect that to us, who are going to give us exactly that. So we end up in situations where we have to work hard in order to get somewhere. And what I want you to shift your belief on right now, in this moment, is to recognize that there is actually an easier way, which you've always had access to, which you have not taken. And the easier way is through your intuition. So now when we can allow this to land in ourselves fully, our nervous system can start to rest a little bit more. Instead of being in that stress response, which is the sympathetic nervous system, we are now going to come into our rest and digest system, which is our parasympathetic response. Now, balancing the opposites means we have equal doses of sympathetic and parasympathetic response mechanisms. When we are able to balance those two, we kind of end up in a neutral zone. And when we end up in a neutral zone, our intuition actually starts firing off because it's not skewed to dullness, which is the result of being in the parasympathetic, too much in the parasympathetic. And that means it's very deactivated, our nervous system. And then when we go into the other extreme, which is the sympathetic nervous system, we are overly activated in the stress response. And that is the sympathetic nervous system, which is triggering our stress response. So overactivation and underactivation of our nervous system results in a shutdown of our intuition. So in order to fire up our intuition, we must get our nervous system to balance out. Now, once we understand that we've been second guessing ourselves and keeping ourselves in the realm of our stress response mechanisms, we can then start to put some solutions in place that will help us to rely more on our intuition. One of the best ways to get our mind to balance out, to become more neutral, is via meditation. There are different types of meditation that different people like. And I think all types of meditations have their benefit, have their place. So I'm not going to recommend one over another. But what I will recommend that you do is find a meditation that works for you. I highly recommend going into a meditation of opposite experiences, which I work with my clients on. It's really about us recognizing one experience and then seeing the other experience. And when we see both of those experiences, our mind can come to a neutral point. When our mind comes to a neutral point, now we are in a state of balance. We are in a state of objectivity. We are in a state of unbiased thinking. We're not skewed to being too restful, which means we're not having entitled thinking, and we're not too skewed to being on the other side, which is in the sympathetic response, overthinking situations. So underthinking and overthinking come to a rest. And now from the space of rest, our intuition starts to give us the answers because our mind, let's say, just calms down. Our mind is neutral. And when our mind is neutral, we're going to recognize that spark within us, which is the spark of creativity, of imagination that comes right in when our thoughts are not going crazy. A normal human being has over 100,000 thoughts in a single day. Oh, yes. So in order to balance ourselves out, what we really want to do is to start relying more and more on our intuition, because that actually has the impact of calming down our thoughts ultimately. So the best way to get in is through meditation. Find a meditation that actually works for you. And when you find that meditation, stick with it. Enter your meditations as consistently as possible, especially if you're new to meditation, as consistently as possible through the same way. So, for example, if you enter through breath, enter through breath. If it's through a count down or a count up or whatever that is, enter through that method. If it's through yoga nidra, do it that way. But be consistent, especially in the beginning stages. And once you reach a state of restful alertness in your meditations, which, by the way, does not mean killing your thought. It actually means allowing the thought to just go, meaning releasing the thought, releasing the attachment to the thought. That's what really meditation is all about. And when you can do this consistently for longer and longer periods of time, it does take practice to build it up. You can start to recognize the difference between your intuition and your thoughts, and also more in the flavor of where you're running yourself on stress and where you're relying more on intuition. And so you have more trust and faith that that first thought that's coming in is actually the right way to go. You feel aligned to it in your heart. You're going to feel your body rest into it. And when that starts to happen, you gain more trust in your intuition than you have in your thinking process. As we start to do this in our lives, we start to realize that the greater gift of our human existence is that we're going to attract all kinds of different experiences. And all these different experiences are pointing us back to who we really are, meaning who we authentically are, okay? So we have started to give ourselves up to stress in certain situations. We now get the opportunity to pull that back within us and to be a little less stressed. Maybe over time, you become very grounded in yourself. And when you become very grounded in yourself, this is really the awakening we can have into our masculinity and our femininity. Both sides, okay? Because all of us have both sides. For a man, his masculinity is going to come forth more. It's going to be a state of restful alertness into the masculine side. And then same with the women. You know, you're going to awaken more into your feminine intuition, your feminine knowing, and you're going to be more rested and trusting of that knowing. And when we start to approach our relationships with this restful knowing and not in our stress response, we start to become more present. We start to become present to others' experiences. We start to become more present to our partner's experiences. We start to get more connected within ourselves to our own experiences. And ultimately, we are here on this planet to really own all of our experiences, make meaning of them, to grow and evolve from them. And instead of putting our hands in the light socket and electrocuting ourselves, we actually step back from situations that are no longer for us. And we gracefully give that up for someone else to deal with. And that's not an avoidance, that's just a knowing that we are who we are. There's no sense of avoidance in that. It's not to say you're going to run away from situations. It means that you're going to make decisions and be in situations in a more grounded way, but give others the ability and the chance to be themselves and not have to, so that they don't have to be in your way of thinking and acting all the time. There's a certain surrender that comes about when we start to live our life in this. And this is really the beauty of our lives. This is when we really start to own our lives and our relationships. Relationships are the toughest game on the planet. And so when we can bring this beauty of ourselves, our true selves, into our relationships, we start to experience genuine intimacy in our relationships. Have a good day.